That bottle of water on your shelf has words like pure and natural printed right on the front. Independent testing found something very different inside. Today, we are exposing 11 of the most popular bottled water brands in America, cross-referencing Consumer Reports testing, FDA recall records, Johns Hopkins research, and peer-reviewed independent studies. What we found is worth knowing before you buy another case. Arsenic, industrial chemicals that accumulate in your body and never fully clear, and up to 240,000 microscopic plastic particles per liter. Not always from the water source, but from the bottle itself. These substances do not flush out. They build up over time, and the longer you have been drinking the same brand, the more that matters. 11 brands to reconsider, ranked from lowest concern to the most serious, then 8 that actually held up under independent scrutiny, so you leave knowing exactly what to reach for instead. Let's start with number 11. Number 11, Arrowhead, the Western States staple. 100% mountain spring water on the label. Nestle has owned it since the 1980s, and for decades that claim gave millions of people in California, Arizona, and Nevada confidence they were drinking something pure and untouched. That confidence became a legal problem. A class action lawsuit alleged the 100% claim was misleading after independent testing found microplastic particles in the water. The argument was straightforward. When a label says 100%, shoppers read that as zero contaminants. Not mostly clean, zero. A 2018 Orb Media investigation with researchers at SUNY Fredonia tested 11 major brands across 9 countries and found microplastics in more than 90% of samples. In half the brands, over 1,000 plastic particles per liter. Arrowhead was among 6 brands named in separate lawsuits over exactly that. The label promised something the water could not deliver. Number 10, LaCroix, the colorful can, the office fridge staple, the brand that made sparkling water feel like a personality choice. For a stretch of time, LaCroix felt like the obvious healthy swap. Then Consumer Reports investigated PFAS across carbonated water brands. PFAS, per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, are synthetic chemicals that do not break down in the environment or in the human body. They accumulate in tissue over time and have been linked to thyroid disruption, compromised immune function, and increased cancer risk. Of 12 brands tested, 7 came back above 1 part per trillion. LaCroix was one of them. The brand pointed to current regulatory standards. The problem is, there are still no enforceable federal limits on PFAS in bottled water. Meeting a standard that does not legally exist is not the same as being clean. Consumer Reports also noted sparkling waters consistently showed higher PFAS than still water, suggesting carbonation itself may be a factor. The can looks clean. What is inside has not cleared the bar. Independent scientists are now drawing. Number 9. Deer Park, the East Coast household brand. The case in the garage, 2 or 3 generations of families who never thought twice about it. Consumer Reports found play at 1.2 parts per trillion, above the 1 part per trillion threshold independent scientists now recommend. Deer Park also appeared in microplastics litigation tied to the same 2018 Orb Media study. Nestle, which owned the brand at the time, said internal testing showed undetectable levels. That gap matters. A company controls what it tests for, when it tests, and whether results ever become public. Internal 0 and independent 1.2 are not always a contradiction. They can reflect entirely different methodologies. Nestle sold Deer Park to One Rock Capital Partners in 2021 for roughly $4.3 billion. The branding stayed. The source did not change. Brand familiarity built over decades is worth less than a recent independent lab result. Number 8. Poland Spring. On American shelves since 1845. Springs in Maine. A name built on geography and heritage that most people never thought to question. In 2017, a class action lawsuit alleged that Nestle had been misleading customers because Poland Spring did not meet the FDA's own legal definition of spring water. The plaintiffs claimed it was drawn from groundwater sources that failed to qualify under federal standards, meaning the word spring on the label was legally contestable. The case settled after years in court. Consumer Reports also found the carbonated version testing above 1 part per trillion for PFAS. Nestlé's response was the same as Deer Park. Internal testing showed undetectable levels. Poland Spring is now part of the Blue Triton brand's portfolio, the same company that took on Deer Park, same trusted name, a legal history and independent testing record that tells a different story than the label always has. Number 7. Aquafina. This is the everywhere brand. The vending machine, the gas station cooler, the hotel lobby. PepsiCo owns it. For years, the packaging leaned into mountains and clean blues, the kind of visual language that implies the water came from somewhere far from anything industrial. It did not. Aquafina is sourced from municipal tap water, the same supply connected to your kitchen faucet. In 2007, after sustained pressure from Corporate Accountability International, PepsiCo agreed to add the words "public water source" to Aquafina's label. That quiet addition confirmed what critics had been saying for years. To be fair, Aquafina runs that tap water through a multi-step purification process, including reverse osmosis, and the finished product meets FDA standards. The water is not the primary issue. The problem is the complete picture. Tap water origins, plastic packaging, and visual branding built specifically to imply something it is not. On that plastic, a 2024 Columbia University study using advanced laser imaging found that the average liter of commercially bottled water contains approximately 240,000 plastic particles, 10 to 100 times more than earlier research had estimated. Most are nanoplastics, small enough to cross cell membranes. This applies to every brand in a PET plastic bottle, but when you stack tap water origins on top of plastic contamination, on top of deliberate visual misdirection, the mountain on the label starts to look less like branding and more like misdirection. You were paying for something that looks like spring water from an elevated source. It was filtered city tap water in a container shedding plastic into the product. The mountain was a design decision, not a sourcing fact. If this is landing differently than you expected, it means it is doing its job. If it is helping you think differently about what you buy, a quick like helps this kind of research reach more people. Number 6. Perrier. This is the prestige one, the European one. The green glass bottle that has been on restaurant tables since 1898. Over a century of brand history that makes people feel confident without ever really thinking about why. Then February 1990 happened. Perrier issued a worldwide recall of approximately 160 million bottles after benzene, a known human carcinogen, turned up in samples tested in the United States. The company initially pointed to a single contaminated filter at its Vergès bottling plant in France. Further investigation showed the problem ran deeper than one component. Perrier was off shelves for months. The generation that watched that recall never entirely forgot it. 3 decades later, Consumer Reports placed Perrier among sparkling water brands registering PFAS above 1 part per trillion. Nestlé, which owned Perrier at the time, issued the same response it gave for Deer Park and Poland Spring. Internal testing showed undetectable levels. Trust is earned slowly. Perrier spent a century building it. The 1990 benzene recall spent a significant portion of that account. When independent PFAS testing surfaces on top of that history, the margin for reassurance gets very narrow. Loyal customers still reach for the green bottle, but loyalty and verified safety are 2 separate conversations, and Perrier has not always been winning the second one. Number 5. Mountain Valley Spring Water. This is the prestigious one. Going back to 1871, bottled from a spring in Hot Springs, Arkansas, served at the White House, recommended in hospitals. If you ask someone who read every label and researched every option which water they trusted most, Mountain Valley was frequently the answer. A class action lawsuit filed in recent years told a very different story. The 47-page complaint alleged that Mountain Valley, marketed as the purest water available, advertised as completely free of pollutants, was found to contain uranium, arsenic, and bromoform. The EPA does not consider any of those 3 substances safe for human consumption at any detectable level. The lawsuit also alleged the company engaged in environmental marketing claims that could not withstand scrutiny. Mountain Valley does offer glass bottles, and glass does eliminate the container origin contamination that every PET bottle carries. But glass only handles what packaging introduces. When the issue is at the source, the material the bottle is made from is beside the point. This was the brand that the most careful, most research-oriented shoppers trusted most. Uranium and arsenic allegations are not a footnote to that reputation. They are a direct challenge to the only reason anyone was paying a premium for it. Number 4. Dasani. This is the Coca-Cola one. Launched in 1999 and built into one of the most widely recognized water brands in the world. Like Aquafina, it starts as municipal tap water, processed through reverse osmosis. But Dasani does not stop at filtration. After purification, Coca-Cola adds back a mineral blend, magnesium sulfate, potassium chloride, and sodium chloride. Magnesium sulfate is what pharmacies sell as Epsom salt. Potassium chloride is widely used in fertilizers. And sodium chloride is plain table salt, added to drinking water and sold as premium hydration until consumer backlash grew loud enough that Coca-Cola quietly reduced the salt content in 2024 without announcing it. That is not even the most serious part of the record. In 2004, Coca-Cola launched Dasani in the United Kingdom. Within 5 weeks, every bottle was pulled from every shelf in the country after testing found bromate levels exceeding legal limits. Bromate is classified as a potential carcinogen. Dasani has never returned to UK retail. And in a 2026 microplastics analysis by the Water Map, testing 7 brands side by side, Dasani produced the highest plastic particle reading in the entire study, a fluorescent contamination signal of 143, the single worst score recorded. Filtered tap water, Epsom salt, and fertilizer compound added back in. A full national recall from an entire country. The highest microplastic score in an independent 7-brand study. If someone handed you a glass with those compounds stirred in, you would set it down. Dasani just puts it in a blue bottle. Number 3. Fiji water. This is the premium import, the square bottle, the pink flower on the label, an artesian aquifer on a Pacific island, rainfall filtering through volcanic rock for hundreds of years. The packaging does not just sell water, it sells the idea of somewhere completely untouched. You are not buying a beverage, you are buying a destination. The FDA has documentation that describes something else entirely. Natural Waters of VD Limited, the company behind Fiji Water, recalled nearly 1.9 million bottles after laboratory testing found manganese contamination and 3 separate types of bacteria in the product. Nearly 2 million bottles of water positioned as among the purest available had to be pulled back from market. Beyond the recall, Fiji was named in a lawsuit filed in January 2024 over microplastic contamination and has faced additional legal challenges over environmental marketing claims that critics argue cannot be independently verified. The brand ships its product approximately 5,500 miles from the Fiji Islands to American store shelves in single-use PET plastic bottles. Plastic degrades, and that degradation accelerates under heat. A bottle moving through sun-exposed shipping containers, warm distribution warehouses, and unrefrigerated delivery trucks has had significantly more time to shed particles into the water than a domestically produced product sitting in a shorter supply chain. You are paying a premium for water that crossed the Pacific inside a container breaking down the entire journey. That is not what the label suggests, and it is not what the people buying Fiji at that price believe they are getting. Number 2. Topo Chico. This is the one people were genuinely passionate about. Not casually loyal, actually passionate. Bartenders who specified it by name, doctors who recommended it by preference. A regional product from Monterrey, Mexico, bottled there since 1895, that felt like a real discovery if you found it anywhere outside Texas or northern Mexico. Coca-Cola acquired the U.S. rights in 2017 for $220 million. Sales jumped nearly 40% in a single year, reaching close to $184 million in U.S. annual revenue by 2020. The cult favorite had gone national. Then Consumer Reports tested it. Topo Chico registered PFAS contamination at 9.76 parts per trillion. That was the highest reading of any bottled water brand in the entire Consumer Reports study. Not slightly above the threshold, nearly 10 times the 1 part per trillion level that independent scientists identify as the point where concern becomes meaningful. These are forever chemicals, linked to cancer, immune system damage, and developmental harm in children. They do not leave the body. Every liter adds to what is already there. After those results became public, Coca-Cola upgraded filtration. A 2021 retest showed contamination had dropped to 3.9 parts per trillion. That is a real improvement. It is also still nearly 4 times the threshold most experts consider appropriate, and the company only moved after the data was already out. The people who drank Topo Chico daily made a deliberate choice. They were not grabbing whatever was convenient. They decided this was the better option. That makes what comes next even harder to sit with, because the number one brand on this list was not bought by people being careless. It was bought by people who thought they had already done everything right. Number 1. Starkey Spring Water. This is the Whole Foods one. Glass bottle, made by Mother Nature on the label, launched in 2015, sold in Whole Foods locations across the country and through Amazon. When it debuted, Whole Foods' own chief operating officer publicly described it as amazingly pristine water that naturally flows from a spring in Idaho. The people buying Starkey were not shopping carelessly. They were shopping at Whole Foods, which is itself a deliberate act. That store has spent decades building an identity anchored in health, transparency, and a sourcing standard conventional grocery retail does not match. When a product carries the Whole Foods name, a significant number of shoppers make a reasonable assumption that someone inside that organization verified the sourcing, reviewed the testing, and confirmed the product deserved to be on that shelf. They paid a premium on exactly that assumption. That assumption was wrong. Consumer Reports tested dozens of bottled water brands. Starkey contained arsenic at levels ranging from 9.49 to 9.56 parts per billion, at minimum 3 times higher than every other brand in the study. A 2019 sample came back at 10.1 parts per billion. The federal regulatory limit is 10. That sample exceeded it. This was not a surprise to the company. In late 2016, the FDA notified Whole Foods that Florida's bottled water regulator had found arsenic in Starkey at 11.7 parts per billion. Weeks later, a second round of testing returned 12 parts per billion. Whole Foods recalled more than 2,000 cases and then kept the brand on the shelf. Out of 130 bottled water products tested by Consumer Reports, Starkey recorded the highest arsenic content of any brand still available for purchase. A class action lawsuit followed. Consumer Reports formally and publicly requested that Whole Foods pull the product. Here is the detail that makes the full picture land. In New Jersey and New Hampshire, tap water is regulated at an arsenic limit of 5 parts per billion. At the levels found in Starkey, that water would not pass the legal standard required to come out of a household faucet in those states. It would fail the test for your kitchen sink. But packaged in a glass bottle with "Made by Mother Nature" on the label, it was sitting on the shelves of a store built entirely on the promise of selling you something better. That is number 1 on the avoid list. Now you know what to stay away from. Here is what actually held up. Best option number 8 is Essentia. This is the purified everyday option, the one you can find in most grocery stores without going out of your way. Essentia runs its water through a 3-stage purification sequence: reverse osmosis, then microfiltration, then ultraviolet light treatment. Each stage removes a different category of contaminant. Together, they strip out nearly everything: PFAS, heavy metals, biological material that survived simpler processes. After purification, trace electrolytes are added back and the water is ionized to a pH of 9.5. Essentia publishes its water quality reports and participates in third-party testing. No recalls on record, no class action lawsuits, no PFAS flags in independent testing. Purified water will not carry the natural mineral complexity of a spring source, but it offers something different and verifiable. A documented picture of exactly what is in the bottle and what is not. For everyday drinking at standard grocery store prices, it is one of the most consistent and transparent options available. Best option number 7, Proud Source Water. This is the aluminum can one, and the can is not aesthetic. It is the point. The 2024 Columbia University study that found 240,000 plastic particles per liter was specifically looking at PET plastic bottles. Plastic degrades. The container itself becomes a contamination source, independent of the water quality at the source. Aluminum does not behave that way. The degradation profile of a metal can is categorically different from a plastic bottle. Proud Source uses Rocky Mountain spring water and has been transparent about sourcing since launch. Aluminum cans do have a thin interior polymer lining, so the microplastic question is not reduced to zero. But the reduction compared to PET plastic is real and measurable. Aluminum is also infinitely recyclable without losing structural integrity, something plastic cannot claim. Proud Source runs higher in price than major national brands and is not in every store. But if reducing microplastic exposure is a priority and glass is not available, the can is a documented step in the right direction. Best option number 6. Flow water. This is the carton one. Plant-based Tetra Pak packaging instead of plastic or aluminum. Spring water sourced at a naturally alkaline pH of 8.1 held in paperboard, made from sustainably sourced renewable materials. The carton does not shed microplastics the way PET bottles do. That removes the contamination pathway that every plastic bottle brand carries by default, regardless of how clean the source water actually is. The carbon footprint of the carton format also runs lower than both glass and plastic. Worth knowing if you think about the full product life cycle, not just what is in the bottle when you open it. Flow makes its mineral content and water quality data publicly available. It is not stocked as widely as major national brands, and the carton takes some adjustment if you have been reaching for a bottle your whole life. But for pairing clean source water with responsible packaging across every stage, Flow is one of the very few brands where both sides of that equation genuinely hold up. Best option number 5. Waiakea. This is the Hawaiian volcanic one, sourced from the Ka'au Aquifer on the Big Island, where rainfall filters through thousands of feet of porous volcanic rock before reaching the collection point. The silica, calcium, and magnesium in that water were not added by a lab. They were deposited by geology over a very long period of time. Waiakea was among the first bottled water brands to earn certified carbon-neutral status and runs a one-for-one program. For every liter sold commercially, a liter of clean water is provided to underserved communities. The water has a natural pH of around 8.2. No PFAS contamination on record in independent testing. No recall history. No class action litigation. 2 honest drawbacks. The price runs above average, and Waiakea still uses PET plastic bottles. So, the microplastic risk from the container is not fully resolved, but the source water is among the cleanest commercially available in the United States, and the transparency around sourcing is consistent. If you are choosing between plastic bottles, the source still matters, and this one holds up. Best option number 4. San Pellegrino. This is the restaurant table one, the green glass bottle, sourced from natural springs near Bergamo in the Italian Alps, in continuous operation since 1899. The calcium, magnesium, and sulfate in San Pellegrino came through underground limestone deposited by geology, not added through a manufacturing step. In a 2018 study testing 259 bottled water brands for microplastic contamination, San Pellegrino recorded the lowest particle counts of any brand examined. In the most contaminated San Pellegrino bottle tested, researchers found 74 microplastic particles per liter. Some brands in the same study came back above 1,000. Part of that difference comes directly from the glass bottle format. Glass does not degrade into the product. It does not shed particles. It is a physical barrier that no plastic bottle can replicate. Consumer Reports testing also found San Pellegrino sparkling water coming in below the 1 part per trillion PFAS threshold that independent scientists now recommend. Over 125 years of documented sourcing and a consistent record in independent contamination studies, that track record is actually verifiable, and that matters. Best option number 3, Voss. This is the Norwegian artesian one, sourced from an aquifer in southern Norway beneath natural formations of rock and sand that filter the water before it ever surfaces. The surrounding region has minimal industrial history, and that matters more than it sounds. Industrial contamination near a water source does not stay in one place. It moves through groundwater over time. Voss has offered glass bottles since launch, and glass remains its defining format. No plastic degradation, no microplastic shedding from the container, no PET contamination building up during storage or transit. The water itself is notably low in sodium and total dissolved solids, producing a clean, neutral taste without heavy mineral interference. Voss costs more than most options in the water aisle. Glass is heavier, which means higher shipping weight and a larger carbon cost per bottle. Those are real considerations if they matter to your decision. But for a consumer whose primary question is what the water contains and what the container is doing to it, Voss is one of the very few widely distributed brands where the packaging and the purity claim are telling the same story. Best option number 2, Aqua Carpatica. This is the Carpathian Mountain one, sourced from the Bajanaru Spring in Romania, near Vatra Dornei, where water filters through volcanic rock formations millions of years old before reaching the collection point. It arrives at the surface with no chemical treatment, no chlorination, and no artificial processing of any kind. What makes Aqua Carpatica genuinely unusual is a detail most shoppers would never think to look for. It is naturally nitrate-free. That is exceptionally rare in commercial spring water. Most springs contain at least trace nitrates from agricultural runoff or geological deposits in surrounding areas. Aqua Carpatica's source and filtration path produce water that arrives nitrate-free without any intervention required. Independent testing shows PFAS at non-detectable levels and heavy metals below measurable thresholds. The mineral profile, calcium at 52 mg per liter, magnesium at 17, reflects what the source geology actually delivers. The naturally sparkling version is carbonated using ancient volcanic CO2, not industrially injected gas. The pH sits at a naturally alkaline 8.2. Aqua Carpatica is a specialty product. You will not find it in every grocery store, and the price reflects that. But in terms of what the water contains, how it got there, and what independent testing has confirmed is absent, it is one of the cleanest commercially available options in the world. Best option number 1, Icelandic Glacial. This is the one that held up under every single measure applied across this entire list. Sourced from the Alfus Spring in Iceland, the water begins as rainfall that filters through ancient lava rock for decades before reaching the aquifer below. Not days, not weeks, decades. By the time it is collected, the water has been processed by geology over years. It is bottled at the spring without chemical treatment, without additives, and without processing beyond bottling itself. Official testing shows arsenic at non-detectable levels, lead at non-detectable levels, PFAS at non-detectable levels. Take every major contamination category that define the worst brands on the avoid list, and Icelandic Glacial comes back below the threshold of detection on every one. The production facility is inspected regularly by the Icelandic Public Health Authority, a government body with legal authority and no financial relationship to the brand. The company runs daily on-site laboratory testing calibrated to standards that exceed what the FDA, the World Health Organization, and the NSF require. The mineral profile is naturally alkaline at pH 8.4, with calcium at 32 mg per liter, and magnesium at approximately 6.5, both present because of the volcanic geology of the source region, not reintroduced after purification. Icelandic Glacial is available in glass bottles, which closes the final open question entirely. No plastic degradation, no microplastic shedding from the container into the water, no recalls in the brand's documented history, no class action litigation, no PFAS detections in independent testing, no industrial contamination anywhere near the source. When a company opens its doors to government inspectors on any given day, runs daily lab checks against international standards, publishes those results, and offers glass as the container, and still comes back clean across every category, that is not a marketing position. That is just what the product actually is. Every brand on the avoid list found the space the regulatory framework allowed and built a profitable product inside it. The marketing language was written to hold your attention on the front of the bottle, while the evidence sat quietly on the back in fine print that most people never read. That system has been running for decades, and the brands inside it have been counting on you never going looking. Most people do not. Those brands are built on that assumption. Before you buy any bottled water, look for published third-party quality reports, not internal company documents, not press releases, not statements made in response to a journalist. Independent laboratory results from organizations with no financial stake in the outcome. And when glass is available, choose it. The bottle is not separate from the product. In too many cases on this list, the bottle is part of the problem. You have been buying these brands for years. Now you know what you were actually buying and exactly what to reach for instead.